Hi, and welcome to Psychology. This is the chapter on states of consciousness. In 1987, Ken Parks of Toronto drove 20 kilometers from his home to his wife's parents' home, where he bludgeoned his mother-in-law to death and attempted to choke his father-in-law to death. However, the father-in-law survived. Seems like a typical sort of crime. However, he was sleepwalking and was thus acquitted of murder in 1989, and then this was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1991. Now this chapter, we're going to examine levels and graduations of consciousness. When we are not fully awake, alert, aware, or perhaps of sound mind, remember from last week the case of Jean-Dominique Bauby. After his stroke, he went into a coma in a unique altered state that not many people have experienced, yet even during this state, Bauby still had some awareness of his surroundings. Two different sort of altered states, sleep and a coma. The study of consciousness didn't come easy in the history of psychology. Both William James and John Watson insisted that consciousness was not a proper area of study, as scientific methods could not be directly observed or measure another person's consciousness. It occurs inside our head. How do you measure that? The past few decades, we've seen a cognitive revolution, and thousands of psychologists now believe we cannot capture the richest in human experience without referring to consciousness. We are flooded with studies of consciousness by psychologists, biologists, neuroscientists, physicists, and even computer scientists. Even though we still cannot directly observe consciousness of another person, psychologists who study consciousness study it through self-reports and new technologies that in some ways permit our observations of such events as neural activity in the brain. So let's start our exploration of what is consciousness and what it means to be conscious. All right, a couple of definitions first. Consciousness, the awareness of external events, internal sensations, including awareness of self and thoughts about one's experience at any given time, moment to moment, and continuously aware of all waking time. We hem and haw regarding our focus and attention, thus we may have a varying degree of awareness from moment to moment. So if consciousness is everything that goes on in the world outside that we take in and process in our brain, all of our thoughts and feelings that go on from within, if on every given moment and every moment of the day, well, you and I both know we don't do that. We can't do that. We can't process everything. So there's some things we pay attention to and some things we don't. So consciousness, and we'll see in some of the videos that I'll post, is a peculiar thing in terms of the study by neuroscientists as what makes up consciousness and what goes on inside our brain to enable us to see what goes on. And it might help us explain, as I mentioned earlier in the sensory and perception, it might help us explain why we don't always see eye to eye on everything. We might even have different perspectives because maybe we don't see the same things that are out there in our conscious world. Altered states of consciousness. This is the mental state other than our typical daily consciousness, such as sleep, meditation, hypnosis, and/or drug-induced states. So from these definitions, it's sleep that's the most prevalent altered state, and our brains are more specifically our very small bit of tissue located in our hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or aka the biological clock, is the regulator of our daily functions, of our body's function, of our regular fluctuation of our body's functions, and it's known as our circadian rhythms. A circadian rhythm is the regular fluctuation in certain bodily functions from a high point to a low point within a 24-hour period. There's two rhythms that are highly relevant to sleep, are the sleep-wakefulness cycle and body temperature. Our eyes are important here. The sun starts to go down, so is therefore the light getting into our eyes starts to go down. Or is the rising of the available light enters our eyes, so we get less light getting into our eyes? This activates the photoreceptors and then travels through the optic nerve, where impulses go to the suprachiasmatic nucleus to stimulate the release, or not, depending upon whether it's dusk or dawn, the hormone melatonin. This stimulates sleep. Light is not the only factor to affect sleep, but there are some external factors that can also affect our sleep. But light is important. You stay up all night, you're fighting the melatonin, and that's going to eventually, over some time, start to screw up or affect your circadian rhythms, this balance between day and night. Now, the external sort of circumstances which people may have had this experience, and you yourself may have had the experience of jet lag. Jet lag is the effect of one's circadian rhythms from the sunlight at a different time. It's affecting sleep and therefore alertness and functioning. Being awake when your biological clock is trying to tell you to sleep. And jet lag can be part of that experience, that if you travel through time zones, and so when you arrive in the town that or the city that you've flown to, maybe you've gone to the other side of your circadian rhythm. So now you're trying to be awake with everybody else in the area that you're in, and yet your whole body's telling you to sleep, or vice versa. 2 would be shift work, rotating shifts, trying to be alert when your circadian rhythms are shutting down, or trying to sleep when they're trying to wake us up. This can cause sleep difficulties, digestive problems, lowered alertness, efficiency, productivity, and safety during these subjective nights. So what can we do to reduce the effects of shift work? Well, 1, healthy diet and regular exercise helps. Moving work schedules forward from days to evenings to nights makes adjustment easier. Rotating shifts every 3 weeks lessens the effect of sleep. On sleep, that is. Researchers are investigating devices like light masks and medication to help, but there's nothing conclusive yet. Now, sleep research began in the 50s in an effort to understand what goes on during our sleep. Research would unveil some new information and basically establish 2 forms of sleep, REM and NREM sleep. REM sleep refers to sleep in which there is rapid eye movement. Rapid eye movement is the REM, and it's sometimes called active sleep, and it makes up to about 20 to 25% of our night's sleep. NREM refers to non-rapid eye movement sleep, and this makes up the rest of our night's sleep. Now, during a typical night, a person sleeps in cycles. Each cycle lasts about 90 minutes. The first sleep cycle contains sleep stages 1, 2, and 3, and 4. A sleep cycle contains 4 stages and an REM sleep. The second cycle contains stages 2, 3, 4, and REM sleep. And the remaining sleep cycles are the sleeper alternatives, mainly between stage 2 and REM sleep, with each sleep cycle having progressively longer REM periods. What's important to note is your sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. So theoretically, if your sleep cycle is what enables us to rest our brain and rejuvenate it, how many do we need? 1, 2, 3. So if 90 minutes and another 90 minutes is 2 sleep cycles, that's 3 hours. The point that I'm trying to make is that I was in an experiment in university, a sleep experiment, and mine is about 90 minutes. And on my own little personal experience, they said that all you needed was 1 sleep cycle, and that would rejuvenate your brain. So I slept for 90 minutes a day for a week. My body really fatigued. My brain not quite as badly as I would have expected. So during this non-REM sleep, our heart rate and respiration are slow and regular. Blood pressure and brain activities are at a 24-hour low point, and there is very little body movement. No rapid eye movement. It's during the REM sleep that large muscles of the body are paralyzed. We actually don't move. Respiration and heart rate are fast, irregular, brain activity increases, and the sleeper has rapid eye movement and vivid dreams. You can see that if you want to sneak in onto your brother or your sister and look at them sleeping, or your mom and dad or your partner, you will at times see their eyeballs flickering underneath their eyelids, and that's REM sleep, and typically that's when we're dreaming. Now, stage 1 sleep is light sleep. Stage 2 sleep is indicated by the presence of sleep spindles, bursts of activity on the EEG. Stage 3 is highlighted by the first appearance of delta waves. This is the slowest and largest wave, brain waves, and stage 4 is predominantly delta waves, and the body is at its lowest level of functioning. Sleepwalking and sleep talking occur during the fourth stage of sleep. REM sleep occurs 4 or 5 times a night, replaces stage 1 sleep in the sleep-wake cycle, and is accompanied by paralysis and the voluntary muscles. Now, infants, and you might know this already, especially if you've got kids, infants and young children have the longest sleep time and the largest percentage of REM deep sleep. Children from ages 6 to puberty sleep best. The elderly typically experience shorter sleep times, more awakenings, and a virtual lack of deep sleep. Now, you've heard these terms, larks and owls. Well, larks are someone who goes to bed early and wakes up early in the morning. About 25% of the people are larks, and they have the fewest sleep problems. Owls, on the other hand, go to bed late and wake up late in the morning. About 25% of the people are owls. Now, sleep deprivation, if you've ever experienced where you've been up doing a few all-nighters, I've had a few of those myself when I've been working and I keep going because I have a deadline to meet, and you spend hours up. Sleep deprivation leads to a significant decline in cognitive and intellectual functioning and negative effects on our mood, alertness, and performance. We did some of this experimenting in university as well, where you were sleep deprived and then would do cognitive tests and intellectual tests. Oh, surprised at how poorly I could do. Following REM deprivation, people experience REM rebound. It's an increase in the percentage of REM sleep stage. REM sleep appears to aid in learning and memory. Now, REM dreams, these are dreamlike, very story-like, or surreal qualities, and are more vivid, visual, emotional, and likely to include aggressive behavior perpetrated by and or against the dreamer than are the NREM dreams. The non-REM dreams occur during the NREM sleep and are more they are more thought-like in quality. There are some factors that influence our sleep needs that are genetic, our genetics, our emotional state, the amount of stress in our lives, and experience significant life changes. Short sleepers are the 20% who require fewer than 6 hours. Long sleepers are those 10% who require more than 9. Now, for some people, about a little less than 20% of their sleep is not typical. And now this is less than 20% of overall sleepers have sleep disturbances known as parasomnias. And these sleep disturbances, which these are behaviors and psychological states that normally occur while one is awake, but these ones take place when the person is asleep or in transition from sleep to wakefulness. And we'll look through a few of them. And again, some of these you're going to find you're familiar with. This one is sleep terrors. And it's a parasomnia in which the sleeper awakens from stage 4 sleep with a scream. They're dazed, groggy, panicky, and with a racing heart. Now, sleepwalking and sleep terrors occur during this partial arousal of slow sleep waves, and a person doesn't come to full consciousness. Episodes are rarely recalled. These disorders are typically found in children and outgrown in adolescents, and they tend to run in families. Sleepwalking has been used as a defense in terms of Ken, as we heard in the introduction, in numerous cases of murder. In many of these cases, the defendant has been acquitted because of the sleepwalking defense. Nightmares, you probably had those, are bad or unpleasant dreams that occur during REM sleep. Anxiety nightmares occur towards morning when REM sleep periods are at the longest. Sleep talking most often occurs in stage 1 or stage 2 sleep. Well, there's 3 major sleep disturbances we'll consider are narcolepsy, sleep apnea, and insomnia. Now, narcolepsy, this is a genetic disorder in which a person suddenly and without warning collapses in complete REM sleep. It's incurable. It is caused by an abnormality in part of the brain that regulates sleep, and it can be quite devastating for people. There are medications to manage it, but it's not curable. Sleep apnea, it occurs in a person who stops breathing for nearly half a minute or more, followed by a gasp for breath. The major symptoms of sleep apnea are excessive daytime sleeping, loud snoring, snorts, gasps, and choking noises while sleeping. The third, insomnia, this is a sleep disorder that involves difficulty falling or staying asleep, or sleep that is really light, restless, and of poor quality. It can be transient or it can be chronic, and it affects between 10 and 15% of adults in any given population. And all these disorders lead to sleep deprivation, which can lead to impairments in functioning and impairments in performance. Now, that's been a quick review of the states of consciousness, part 1. We will in part 2 look at meditation and the influence of drugs on sleep. All right, everybody, we'll see you next week.